right. So the first question for today, or first topic we're going to cover today for lacrosse goalies is mastering your position away from the post. Okay, so I've talked about this a lot over the years, but about goalies being unprotected, and so I don't want people to go like roll their eyes in their head like, oh, there goes Coach Edwards again talking about protection. But I just want to talk about this kind of because it has affected kind of how goalies understand where they are in the cage and on the field and how they use their posts or not. So part of that is when we go back into the 90s and we look at the introduction of offset heads and athletes, into the 2000s, where basically youth sports performance, strength and conditioning took off. Like athletes got bigger, faster, stronger, and goalies have not kept up. Okay, goalies have not kept up. So what's happened is that as goalies have retreated into the cage, and there's coaches out there and there's clinics basically telling goalies that they should stand deep in the cage so they have more time to react to the ball. One of the things that did is it put goalies closer to the post, right? So as a goalie, you can use the butt end of your stick to reach to one post, and then you can use the head of your stick to reach to the other post. And so we do want goalies to kind of get away from looking to the post. So the first thing a young goalie will do is, coach is warming him up, and coach may or may not move in an arc, and then all of a sudden little Jimmy or Karen's in there, and she's standing too far left or right, and coach says, whoa, find the middle of the cage. And so that's actually not great coaching, because then what the goalie gets used to is lining up their body between them and the shooter, right? So it's like their body splitting the cage in half in relation to the shooter's body. But when a player shoots the ball, if they shoot with any sort of sidearm, those angles change. And but when the goalie is like back in the cage, they can either take a quick glance right or left, or they can reach with their stick, and it's very safe. And you literally become like a blind person with a walking stick, realizing like when you touch the post, you can tell how far away you are and where center is. Okay. Now, but as a sport, lacrosse goalies are horrible at understanding where they are in the cage and where they are away from the post. And so when you look at sports like, other goalie sports, field hockey, for one, the goalie doesn't have the luxury to tap the post. Okay. They may in certain situations where the ball is like really close to the end line, but those are rare. Those aren't as common as they are when the ball is out front. And so what the goalie ends up doing is the goalie gets really good at leaving a post, coming out to the ball, backing up, going across the front of the cage without ever touching a post or looking for one. All right. Now in lacrosse, there's a bit of a habit that I don't like. I don't teach, but when you play, like you'll have goalies who mark the field like this. Well, if I can't touch the post, well, I'm going to mark the crease, which every field director, like every field maintenance guy across the world, just loves sarcasm. But then it gets the goalie to look down. And a story that I've shared before. Like I remember in high school playing a game where I did that, and what ended up happening was the other crease on the other end. So when we took our our side of the field and warm up, I remember marking the field like that, and then what I did was I looked downfield at the other net. Turned out the school that had that we were playing at, when they had lined the field, the crease was off, right? So the crease was about like 5 yards to one way or the other. I can't remember which. So my lines were actually completely off as well. And so I got stung on a couple goals where I thought I had the net covered, but there was obviously I was off center. I was where I wanted to be. Okay, so I don't teach that either. I want goalies to just kind of get used to this. Now, so field hockey goalies are good at it. Soccer goalies are really good at it because the net's huge, the field's huge, the ball can be shot from a long distance, even at a young age. And so goalies are taught to come out and basically, cut down the angles to the point where if they get out a certain distance, if they go too far, then they can get shot over and they don't have enough time to get back. Okay. But goalies at least learn, what that distance is and how quickly they can recover things along those lines, what they can get away with. Ice hockey also. Ice hockey goalies spend an incredible amount of time, probably the most out of any goalie in any goalie sport, working post to post out to the point, back to the post, out to the other point, back to the post. Oh, puck's in the corner. I'm on the post. Puck goes out front. And they're constantly working kind of in these 6-foot sections where they are they're learning where the post is and where they are in relation to the post as they move out away from the cage, and then they back pedal or back skate, if you want to use that term, while they watch the puck. Right? They're not really looking for the post. They can get there, and really good goalies will do that. Right? And so lacrosse goalies, though, never really take that time. Right? It's not part of their warm up primarily. It's one thing I encourage my goalies to do, is to take some time working in kind of 6-foot increments, learning like coming out, backing in, where are those posts, taking the time to do that. So what ends up happening, though, is that because lacrosse goalies don't do that, then they're uncomfortable coming out away from the cage. Okay. So this to me is then no longer a problem of, oh, you should stay back in the net so that you have time to react to the ball. Well, then you're not taking advantage of the size of your body in the cage. Okay. So we all agree, like if I take a little tiny goalie and I put them in the net, all right, they're going to take up a certain square footage. Now, if I take a really fat goalie, and I'm using fat like with love and affection, but really, like if I took a big, fat, obese goalie, put them in the cage, they're going to take up more square footage. Correct? Right, correct. So now, if I take that little guy or that little girl and I move them out, I can actually have them almost take up the same amount of space in the cage. They would take up the volume of space in front of the net, similar to that of that big fat obese goalie, right? Now, for those of you getting offended by me saying fat and obese, like whatever, like it's all geometry here, and so whether you pad up or whether you're padded up, um, like think of it along those lines. Don't get offended. Okay. So the idea here, though, is that when a goalie is uncomfortable coming out from the cage and leaving those posts, well, they're not going to probably play to the best of their ability because they haven't practiced it. And one of my complaints about lacrosse goalies is that we haven't seen the best lacrosse goalies play this sport, because even at the pro level, there's only a handful of goalies that can actually do this. Dylan Ward of Canada is one of those goalies. Blaze Rudin occasionally. Brett Queener was fantastic at it. Adam Gittleman occasionally will play out towards the ball because they're comfortable at being away from the cage. So what you need to do here with your goalie, and when people always ask, like, what's something my goalie can do at home when they don't have any friends to shoot on them? Well, this is one of those things. They can actually get used to moving in 6-foot segments, and you can take like painter's tape, which is that green or blue. It's called frog tape. You can get it at Home Depot. It's so you can take a hockey puck and use painter's tape and tape it down to the carpet or the floor or whatever. Remove it after a day or two because it's not supposed to spend time, like a ton of time there. But then replace it. But your goalie can actually be working on those 6-foot segments, right to left, out, across the bedroom floor, back to the post, like whatever. Be creative, right? That's something they can actually work on in their house. They can be scrolling through TikTok and basically shuffling from side to side in 6-foot segments because you've taped like 2 hockey pucks to the floor, right? Something along those lines, right? So they can be working on that, because as I mentioned, like lacrosse goalies are probably, out of all the goalie positions, the worst at using their pipes, like understanding where they are in relation. Now, one of the things that I used to do as a goalie, like a lot of goalies struggle with, like, what do you do when the ball's in the other end of the field, right? Do you get bored? Or you think, you're looking over on the sideline, whatever. How do you stay in the game when the ball's in the other end of the field? Well, one of the things that I used to do was I used to come out to the restraining line. So I used to come out to about 20, 25 yards. And what that would do, obviously, is kind of up your level of awareness, because if something happened, well, you needed to backpedal and get into the cage. So I got to a point where I could, go all the way out to the restraining line. And then let's say if something happens in the offensive end, the other team's coming down on a fast break, I could backpedal into the cage without looking at the cage, right? I got comfortable with that experience and that distance. And why? Just because I put myself in that situation. Now, a lot of goalies, they'll never leave the crease, right? We had photos earlier this year of goalies who would they're just standing on the crease and they look absolutely bored, or they're leaning on the post. Get out of the crease, get upfield. The other thing that we did, and Carrie Ann, yes, I see you there. So the other thing that allowed me to do was our high school team got really good that, like, let's say in the offensive zone, let's say the offense, passed from side right to top center and the ball sailed over the midfielder's head. Well, that ball would come into our half of the field, and as a unit, we got really good at, like, okay, the defenseman would go up to chase down the loose ball with an opposing attackman, and instead of trying to fight for that ball at midfield and messing it up, right? And sometimes it would bump over on the offensive half, and then, like, their midi would get it, and then it was this weird, messed up fast break from top left at the midfield stripe. What we would do is, like, the defense would just cut sticks or lift as that ball got close, and that ball would go through. Right? It would have a little bit of pace, and because I was already so far out there, I could go chase down that loose ball. And then what our midfielders were taught to do is a midfielder would come, like, whichever midfielder was closest to the midfield stripe would just get over the midfield line. And what that would do is it would allow our long pole to release over the midfield stripe. And between me, that attackman, and that long pole, we just got the ball in the offensive zone real quick and got it back to the O. It was really easy. Okay. So, so what I don't like about certain coaches, okay, one of the things that I don't like about certain coaches is that they fear making mistakes, and therefore they don't coach things. Like, we had this discussion a few months ago about the girls' game and clears, and how coaches worried about, like, goalie misses the ball, or, like, drops the ball, then we get some weird restart and the goalie's behind the ball. I get it, but you can't coach out of fear. Like, you can't coach an elite athlete by worrying about what mistakes they're going to make. You have to put them in positions to succeed, right? And so one of the ways to do that is to get your goal, especially if your goalie, like, is halfway decent athletically, right? Like, you can use these, and this is for the boys and the girls, okay? Is you can put them in situations to succeed, and we want them to have these experiences. And what I hate is, like, when I work with a high school goalie, when I'm coaching a goalie from a distance, and I get to see their video, and I see them in a game situation, and I see a coach who's, like, basically got their goalie, like, quarantined, which is an appropriate term right about now, quarantined to the crease. It's like, don't you dare leave. Or I hear the moms on the sidelines all, like, freaking out when their goalie's out on the rest of the field. I want you to look at your goalie. Okay, when the ball is out of the cage, when it's not a scoring threat, I want you to think of your goalie as a midfielder who's in the cage. Okay, so this is where I want you to take that approach. I don't want you to, we'll talk about it later, but I want you to think of your goalie just like any other player on the field. Not that it's like some dude with a big stick, right? Or some dudette with a big stick. Now, a lot of times what happens there is the dudette or the dude isn't really good with their stick skills. That's the problem, okay? So we want to get them out of the cage. So a couple questions here. Barry McNamara, love that idea of having the goalie come out during some downtime. Totally. It completely snaps a goalie into the game experience, right? Because they have to pay attention, right? They have to pay attention, because if they don't, they might get scored on, right? Now, people say, like, well, they could get shot on. A kid could pick up the ball in the offensive zone and score in the open net. Yeah, okay. All right. That's true. But, like, what are the odds of that happening? Right? One, what are the odds of your goalie getting shot from a sniper in the stands and they can't get back to the cage fast enough? What are the odds that that player is going to be so accurate that they actually hit the open net? Right? Like, what are the odds that that player is actually going to get into a situation where they can pick up a loose ball, have the time in the room to actually get that ball down the field? Like, it's just that's usually an argument that I don't really give much credence to. David Ammenhauser writes, okay, I think one of the things that make it easier for an ice hockey goalie is the blue-colored ice and the red outline of the crease. Something like that would be great for lacrosse. It might also make it easier for the refs to see when someone steps into the crease. True, David, that's true. But one thing hockey goalies will do is when that puck is, like, they're not looking down either. Right? They're not looking, they're focused on the puck. And this is what we want our goalie to be focused on: the ball and the field, right? And with a little bit of like literally like a little bit of practice, a goalie will get really, really good at this, and they can focus on, oh, there's that, there's that midi top left, right? And then, oh, but there's a girl open side right. I can focus, I can turn, right? I can backpedal. So part of it is learning what a goalie can get away with. And what I want to have happen is I would rather have a young goalie, you know, learn how to step away from the post, be aggressive to the ball, and then have a pass go cross crease. And then, oh, wait, now the goalie's got to figure like what that does is opens up a whole lot of coaching. One, why is that player open? Like which defender left him or her? Could the goalie have seen that? Did the goalie not read like what formation the offense was in? Did the goalie think they could get across, but then ultimately they found out they were a little too slow to get there? Well, that's all good. Those are all learning experiences that some goalies never get to because coaches don't allow them to be in that position to fail. All right. So I think, in terms of the blue, if let's say the crease was all white, again, you're right. Like, but now a goalie has to look down to see where they are in that crease, and we don't want that, right? So, and I'll tell you this as like as someone who knows ice hockey goalie coaches, they're not teaching like that. They're not teaching like, oh, you're in the blue ice and like whatever. No, they're like, okay, you're on the left post, you're out to the point. All right. And there's somebody at the point giving them a reference going like, okay, you're too far left, too far right. Go back, do it again. Player goes to the post, comes back out. Coach goes, okay, you're too far left, too far right. Do it again. Goalie goes back, makes the adjustment. And what that goalie is learning is that proprioception. I don't know if that's necessarily the spatial awareness. I think it's spatial awareness in this case of where they are on the field in the relationship to the post. They move out, and then, I just had an experience recently with a goalie where they were super jacked up for a game. And so everywhere they were moving, they were overdoing everything. So that goalie moving from the post out to the shot from top center was like so excited. He was too far right, or vice versa. He was too far left. So these things kind of happen. So that's a great question, David. I just know with a little bit of practice, your goalie will get this like in a heartbeat. Okay. Bob McGee writes, great idea. Great word for them to be engaged. That's true. Joe Rose, sorry, I'm late. Yeah, that just, it's all good. Joe Rose up in Rochester. Kinesthetic awareness, not totally. Kinesthetic is more, I think we're talking here more spatial awareness. Kinesthetic is more tact. There's proprioception, like balance and where you are in space, like when you're twisting and moving, right? For those of you guys all engrossed in the Simone Biles ordeal this last week, that's what there's proprioception. So like when you sprain your ankle and you're trying to balance, like you have proprioception there. So anyway, it's as a goalie, we're learning where we are on the field, in relation to the post and relation to the ball. And and the sooner your goalie learns that, what's really interesting is that the sooner a young goalie spends some time with that, the sooner they're unleashed. It's like they're not tethered to the cage or the crease anymore. They don't get just better in front of the cage, but they actually get better around the crease, like behind the cage on clears and things like that. They just know, right? And so it's really important to just do that. And it really only takes about like 2.5 minutes before practice, putting your goalie, like doing a little bit of pipe work, coming out, you could set up cones, you could set up shooters who are getting ready to shoot, right? You could, I did this once before. Oh God, this is a long time ago, but like I set up our team in a shooting drill and we had 4 stations of shooters. And while we were setting up the balls and stuff, I had 4 guys and I said, all right, listen, I want you to set up the cones, but I want you to stand there. And Braden was the goalie on this particular team. So what Braden did was Braden's job was we did 10 rotations. It was a lot, but so it was basically 40 moves. Okay. So Braden would get on the right post and then he would imagine that the first guy at that first cone was a shooter, and the shooter's responsibility wasn't to shoot anything, but was to tell Braden if he was centered in the cage. All right. And then Braden, if Braden didn't get it, he would back to the post and he'd come back out again. And then that kid would give him a thumbs up or no. Right. And so then Braden would go back to the post, and then he'd go out and line up for the second shooter. Right. And so I was encouraging Braden to play higher in the crease, a higher arc for those of you. And then he would back in. And so we would do that. And we did 40 of those. We did 10 rounds. And it took like 2.5 minutes. It wasn't much at all. But Braden got some like ridiculous reps. And within like a week of that, he was solid. Right. And so we had that. But most coaches don't give their goalie that time. Most goalies aren't, they're not proactive enough to take that time, but it's really important to get that time. So, so does anybody have any questions on that? If you got any questions, go ahead and pop in the comments. And I'll just finish on that before I move on to the next comment for today. I've got the Olympics playing in the background, and my Fire Stick just defaulted, which really bugs me. So I'm multitasking. I'm watching. So I've been in Canada now 20 years. So like athletically, I'm pro-American. I'm also pro-Canadian, and the Canadians today, Andre DeGrasse Tyson won gold in the 200 meter, which was pretty cool. That guy's he's a cool dude. So, Carrie Ann, sounds like a good drill. How can we modify it for backyard play? So with backyard play, you're going to have to, so one, that example of like, you can do it in a bedroom. Like you can literally put it in a, like, most bathrooms have 6 feet of space. Some do, some don't. I get it. But you could tape a hockey puck down, 2 hockey pucks down 6 feet apart. And while your goalie's like brushing their teeth, they can shuffle from right to left. And what'll happen is that as they step towards the puck, they'll feel that puck against their foot, right? They'll feel, and then they can step to the sink and then backpedal. Like you can do that. For backyard play, very simple. Like, if you got a net, and let's say I'm going to shoot on the goalie, and we're going to work on shots from like side left, right? Tight angle shots from side left, because their coach never works on that. So I'm going to put my goalie on the right side pipe, and he's going to visualize in his head maybe a feed from back right, across the front of the cage to top left, like mimicking like your man down. Okay. Or for the girls, especially for the girls, they're, a lot of times we see a lot of sweeps, right? They come right across the front of the cage, and we're going to focus. Now, we don't necessarily want the goalie to be so deep in the cage, but a goalie can play out and then back in and see where she is in relationship to that post. Okay. And just getting used to that space. All right. So doing something very simple is like having a shooter in one point and having that goalie work from a ball, like an imaginary ball being passed from behind out front to that shooter in the backyard. Whether that ball is like, you could do it from X and the goalie just has to pivot, right? Pivot in space and line up, right? And then that person out there can just go like, okay, you're too far right, too far left. Do it again. Okay. So the idea is not to change space, like not to have the shooter change every time. It's like, okay, let's do 5 of these, right? Or 3 of them, whatever it needs to take, right? And then as soon as the goalie kind of gets that down, then change, right? Then change position, okay? So that's a great question. DeGrasse runs faster than Connor McDavid skates. This is true. That is very true. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening wherever you are. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you like this, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. When you're ready, head on over to lacrossegoalieuniversity.com/coaching so I can work with you and your goalie. And while you're at it, check out athletespecific.com to learn more about mental performance and high performance. You may not know this, but I work with athletes in a variety of sports. Lacrosse is my love, but man, I love athletes and the families who support them. So head on over to athletespecific.com, check it out. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.